Part of me wants to ask the question, when did you first hear of A24? But I think the better question is, when did you first hear the term A24 vibes or A24 horror, or this movie feels like an A24 film? Because even though these may be terms or phrases that cinephiles and Letterboxd users either find as part of their daily vocabulary or find themselves rolling their eyes at, they are baked into the lexicon of the modern, young, and online film viewer in 2025, and they've been for some time. And also simultaneously, it's caused many to pause and think more critically about A24 as a company and think about a relationship to corporate branding rather than the films or the filmmakers themselves. But I do want to name, I think that this association that we have with branding is natural even in film, whether we're talking about A24 or Neon or MUBi. Naturally, we all love the new guy in town. We all love having access to some niche bit of knowledge that we can share as a party trick, and we all love high quality, whether we're associating this with luxury or not. There are people who speak as highly of Ferrari, Lamborghini, and BMW as there are people who do the same for Honda or Toyota or Nissan with reliability, and trust me, I grew up in a Cambodian American household. I've never trusted a Southeast Asian person's parents who are driving outside of those brands. Some brands supersede the good itself. Most people will use the term Band-Aid rather than bandage, or Kleenex instead of tissue, and some people will say Birkin more than they actually say bag. And A24 proved very quickly they were releasing quality films, and the term A24 vibes, as nebulous as it all is, speaks to a lot of these indie films that are moody, dark, thought-provoking, maybe a little bit weird, and most importantly, these are films not made by major studios. It captures a specific taste for film, going against the grain, and spoke to the quality of these films. And regardless of my critique, it was fairly earned at a point. This obsession with brand and film was always going to happen with the A24s and Neons and MUBis of the world someday, especially in our hyper-capitalistic world, and this need for people to become fanboys over all of their favorites. It's just newer in the world of film, and maybe this speaks to the capitalistic relationship of quote-unquote consuming content versus being engaged with the art form of film. I'm also not going to act like a hypocrite here. I have A24 shirts, a hat, a MUBi tote bag, MUBi socks, Neon branded merchandise. You get it. But I don't think anyone ever did this for Warner Brothers or Universal or Sony back in the day. People used to just appreciate the art, whether we're talking about students of the art form unpacking every formal technique and theme of a film, or someone seeking casual entertainment. And now we all act like we're micro studio executives, acting like we know what we're talking about or acting like we have some sort of stake in this business. And I gotta ask, why did this all suddenly change overnight? Why can't some people view these companies just as companies when noteworthy controversy shapes a company in the present? Because it wasn't always this way, and didn't just start with an obsession over awards or the use of generative AI or receiving blood money, but now we've gotten to this point. Hi, my name is James. This is Movie Good or Movie Bad. I'm very sorry ahead of time to anybody that I know at A24 or MUBi or Neon. This is really nothing personal against anybody individually, but I think it's very important that we talk about these companies very critically. Because as time has gone on, these companies have changed so much, and I've had so many conversations with so many friends about the topic that I feel like it was really important just to kind of name everything out there, even if it means I don't have a functional relationship anymore with any of these companies, sadly. We really need to talk today about how do you start off as such a small art house distributor or production house and turn into something that people are so willing to boycott online. And to do this, we also need to break down some of the older films compared to the newer films from these studios, also talking about the old relationships to the new relationships, and how we're seeing so many bridges burn and form for better or worse. But if you enjoyed this video or video essays like this, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, hitting that bell. Only about 20% or so people who watch this video will probably be subscribed, and I want to make that number a lot higher. I'm hoping to be releasing weekly videos all throughout September and October, with horror content being planned all throughout October. I'm so excited for it. I apologize to everybody for the delay between this video and the last video. I was a little bit momentarily busy. If you want to follow me on other places, I post daily on TikTok. I've been on Letterboxd for the past 6 or so years, and I post a lot of smack on my Instagram stories just because I can't make a video for everything, so follow me everywhere else. In this video, there's going to be a lot of referencing to the brand new New Yorker article, A24 Empire of Auteurs. I think this article was really well done. I think it really kind of put a critical lens on the company that most people don't have, and I want to take it a step further with a few of the points that are addressed in that original article. So I think to paint a picture, I actually want to start off with the history, and let's just go back back to the beginning. A24 has been around since 2012, founded by Daniel Katz, who used to lead a film finance group called the Guggenheim Partners, David Fenkel, who used to be the president and co-founder of Oscilloscope Laboratories, a film distributor, production company, and boutique label for physical media that has done some really phenomenal work over the years, and John Hodges, who previously worked at Big Beach, another indie film studio that produces 1 or 2 films a year, maybe their most notable work being Little Miss Sunshine and Jules. You remember that weird little alien movie with Ben Kingsley that we all saw ads for and none of us thought was a real movie, yet all of our grandparents saw it? Okay, just me. And the immediate goal of A24 was to quote-unquote share films with a distinct point of view. Like most other indie startups, there was a draw to model the company off of the work of Miramax or Harvey Weinstein's company in the 80s and 90s, which, despite your thoughts on the disgusting, putrid shell of a human being that is Harvey Weinstein, and to quote Ava DuVernay herself, many people are quote-unquote still a fan. Oh, Jesus Christ, they are really going to eulogize this man at the Oscars when he croaks, right? I'm just mentally preparing myself for that nightmare. But back to A24, the company clearly did not start off as the indie darling that everyone knows it for today. Their first film, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, Nepo baby Roman Coppola, A Glimpse Inside the Mind of Charles Swan III, was a train wreck. It is one of the worst films I've ever seen. Seriously, it is bad. If you're going to sit down and watch every single A24 film like I attempted to, you will start off there, and it's horrible. It is a miracle there was a recovery after this, but luckily they would have a few hits early on with the Harmony Korine directed Spring Breakers, The Very In The Moment, The Bling Ring, and an early film from Dune director Denis Villeneuve, Enemy. But not spoken about early on in the company's history, there are clearly plans to expand the company even then. Within the first year of the company releasing films, they'd signed a deal with DirecTV for $40 million where A24 films would appear on pay-per-view on DirecTV 30 days before their theatrical release. And then this would be followed by an Amazon Prime Video deal where A24 movies would be available on the service after a DVD and Blu-ray release. In 2018, they would sign a deal to produce and manage the theatrical release of several films through Apple TV+, while also having a streaming deal for their films to appear on Showtime until 2022, and then when this deal ended, it was immediately followed by HBO Max taking over streaming duties for A24. These deals are fairly normal. They're not the corporate money grabs that some may claim them to be. It's fairly normal and typical in the current modern landscape of film to find ways to make your movies profitable, but it's also different to keep the ship afloat than it is to build the Titanic 2 and act like you can't crash into the iceberg. And to echo parts of the New Yorker article, it's probably in 2015 when things begin to change in a massive upward swing for the company. The writer of that article quotes The Witch as the first big and viral film for the company, which is likely true, especially with that quote-unquote elevated horror angle, but that also denies that Ex Machina was a big hit for the company early on in 2015 and formed the beginning of their relationship with Alex Garland, who is now directing their largest budget film, an adaptation of Elden Ring, and 2015 was also when A24 released Room, their first Best Picture winner. And to be fair, I guess the time that Room won Best Picture would be around the time that The Witch was released in theaters, and would also precede A24's next Best Picture winner, which was also the first film that they produced in-house, Moonlight. And all throughout this article for The New Yorker, it's clear that whether we're talking to past collaborators of the company like Kelly Reichardt, who made First Cow and Showing Up, or Barry Jenkins, who made Moonlight, or current collaborators like Celine Song, writer and director of Past Lives and Materialist, there's a lot of love for the executives at A24. They've done a lot to amplify the voices of directors who have strong ideas about the movies they want to make, including flying out to see Alex Garland in London, watching him play Elden Ring and say, sure, let's schedule a meeting with Hidetaka Miyazaki and get this movie made, or scheduling 30-minute calls to pitch films with past collaborators because of the already existing and trusting relationship between them. There's also a clear understanding within the company that if the company is in the green and makes money as a whole, then it's okay if movies like Eddington or Beau is Afraid don't necessarily make money. It's about the bold swing and supporting the creative, and that is why artists like Ari Aster have stuck around, but haven't many also left the company too? We'll talk more about that later. For me, I think A24 vibes must have solidified sometime in 2017. The company already had 2 Best Picture winners, and while not listing every single film that they released in that year, between the middle and end of 2017, they would release It Comes at Night, A Ghost Story, Good Time, The Florida Project, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Lady Bird, and The Disaster Artist. Which, despite your individual thoughts on some of these, it is a largely solid list of unique films that left an impression on many, and I'm sure that iconic A24 logo quickly became seared into the minds of many people very quickly. And as A24 was on the rise at the time, Neon would also be founded in 2017 and appears to be A24's biggest competitor in the indie market, even though the folks at Neon believe that Netflix is their biggest competitor. And for many betrayed by the current quality of A24 films, Neon is now their new favorite golden child, free from criticism, even though they share some of the similar issues surrounding distribution of their smaller and lesser known films as A24. The company was founded by current CEO Tom Quinn and Tim League, co-founder of the Alamo Drafthouse theater chain and man who was ousted as soon as it was learned that he ignored harassment claims from women about other higher-ups at the Alamo Drafthouse during his tenure there. And Neon's critical success, in my opinion, comes along far quicker in their company history compared to A24. Their first film, Colossal, the kaiju dark comedy with Anne Hathaway, was described early in production as Godzilla meets Lost in Translation, but even though I remember the buzz when this film first came out, it was sadly a box office bomb. It would matter little though, considering the company's profile would expand very quickly with their first Oscars campaign within their first year, and the film Margot Robbie should have won Best Actress for I, Tonya, which was nominated for 3 Oscars and won Supporting Actress for Allison Janney's performance in the film. 2018 was a largely strong year for Neon as well, but it's 2019 that really catapults them into the big leagues. Honeyland, an incredible documentary about a Macedonian beekeeper, got major buzz in the documentary community. It got an Academy Award nomination, but the year was also so important because Neon also helped to distribute Portrait of a Lady on Fire, one of the greatest queer films of the current millennium, and Parasite, a searing critique of capitalism that really captured American audiences' attention in a way that shocked me because it meant that they read subtitles, leading to Parasite becoming the first non-English film to win Best Picture, and in the greater context of Neon's recent reputation, their Palme d'Or. And if you haven't been paying attention, they've won the Palme d'Or, or the highest honor awarded at the Cannes Film Festival, or the highest award in the world of film aside from Best Picture at the Oscars, 6 years in a row. First it was for Parasite, then it was for the body horror film Titan, then it was for the satire The Upper Class Triangle of Sadness, then the deeply mysterious legal drama Anatomy of a Fall, the steamy dark Cinderella story that caused far too much controversy in Nora, and then finally a story that is supposedly a comical and dark critique of the Iranian government by Jafar Panahi, a director who's been imprisoned multiple times because of his critique of the Iranian government, and that film is titled It Was Just an Accident. This is really monumental for Neon. The Palme has always been a tremendous deal, but this has really made many young viewers in the film community more interested in engaging with these films and watching non-English films, which is always a plus, and CEO Tom Quinn has pointed out before that when testing audiences for why they saw a film, for Parasite, it having won the Palme d'Or was reason number 5 that people saw the film, but when Anatomy of a Fall won in 2023, it was the number 1 reason. And while I'm saving this discussion for later when I really lay into these companies and the obsession with brand and why we can't critique them, we need to talk about the work that Neon really does here and why I'm concerned that the company's own obsession with winning the Palme is going somewhere completely catastrophic in terms of releasing all these films and making sure that they do get adequate releases. MUBi, funnily enough, is the oldest of the 3 companies that we're talking about today, and I guarantee that not many living souls who are watching this video from the film community knew that they were originally founded in 2007 as the auteurs by a Turkish entrepreneur, Efe Kakarel. And the next year, they would begin a partnership with the Criterion Collection to stream Criterion's films online, before Criterion would then make a switch to Hulu, which I genuinely don't remember, and then Filmstruck before we got the Criterion channel. Shortly after their deal with Criterion fell apart, the auteurs would then change their name to MUBi in 2010. A word with no exact meaning designed to rhyme with movie, so that way audiences all across the globe could say it and understand it, which currently speaks to the fact that MUBi is available in over 190 countries across the globe. And despite MUBi's existence primarily as a streaming service for so long, most of my conversations with people about early MUBi were about its existence as primarily a web form before it shifted to theatrical distribution in just the US and UK in 2016, before rapidly expanding with time. They had the UK rights for Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria remake in 2018, had rights for a couple of odd independent international films here and there, the Brazilian film Bacurau in parts of Europe and also India. If you love Parasite, you might really dig that. Swallow, a very unique and upsetting type of body horror film. They handled a lot of the European and Latin American releases for Shiva Baby. Park Chan-wook's criminally underseen Decision to Leave was also a MUBi film, a Hitchcockian romance mystery that kept me on the edge of my seat, and of course, all of their prestige that came with their shocking Oscars contender about celebrity and fame as a woman, and might be the first body horror film ever to get nominated for Best Picture, The Substance. And while recent, it's drawn a lot of eyes to MUBi, made them far more interested in producing films, including Jim Jarmusch's Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, which just controversially won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, Jane Schoenbrun's Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, and Kelly Reichardt's The Mastermind. And now, in less than 12 months, MUBi has lost all of this goodwill, despite a slate of films anticipated by many for so long, because they couldn't help themselves and took a $100 million cash infusion in May 2025 from Sequoia Capital, an investment firm that has invested in Israeli military tech after October 2023, and has now caused MUBi to be valued at $1 billion. I want to paint a picture here because even though I'm critiquing these companies for three very different reasons, these companies have gotten quite big. Most people don't know that two of these companies are worth over $1 billion, and while very small compared to a Warner Brothers, a Universal, a Sony, these are not small companies by any stretch of the imagination. And of course it makes sense that we love these companies as much as they did. They were releasing films that were so unique that weren't being released by these other major studios, but I think the part that feels like it's under critique for me is the fact that we let that build up into a cult of personality around all of them, especially A24 in this case. While I'm sure that there have been hats or t-shirts with the logos of major studios before, this has taken on a whole new life in the 2020s with some of these smaller brands, and we started it. Zoe Bayer, A24's creative director, whose first bit of her job involved managing social media, quickly realized that people were tattooing A24 onto themselves, and then they quickly realized, what if we made merch? In 2017, they would quickly print a series of sweatshirts with lettering that spelled out A24 to clarify any brand confusion with the title of the company. I've seen people who've said A24 before, and these sweatshirts sold out extremely quickly, leading to the amount of merchandise generated by the company to become overwhelming to keep track of, and has made some online think of A24 as a gift shop rather than a film studio. Not critiquing every single bit of merchandise that we have here, I own a number of these things, but looking at the store right now, I'm going to list every single bit of merchandise that I see. I see sweatshirts. I see t-shirts with breast pocket logos. T-shirts with giant A24 font across your chest in the style of your favorite movie's logo. Specified t-shirts that fit in universe, such as the Paula's Diner t-shirt from Eddington. T-shirts with attempts to make trendy sayings like Materialist Girl. Socks, hats, both ball caps and beanies, gym shorts, a bandana, hoodies, a locket, kids' t-shirts, a fleece jacket, and that's just clothing. There are also trinket trays, umbrellas, water bottles, a beach towel, mugs, blankets, totes, stickers, ornaments. There is a wait list for their record crate, candles, car fresheners, a desk tray, an office notebook, soap somehow, a dog leash, a collar, coasters, a planner, bookshelf bookends, a stencil, a slip mat, a duffel bag, a ceramic set, a keychain, calendars, packing tape, screenplay books, novelizations of their films, children's books, crossword puzzles, a guidebook to Florida, coffee table books, song readers, cookbooks, little zines that you can get through your AA24 membership or a yearly membership where you can get early access and a discount to buy this merch, but you can also buy these all separately. Puzzles, vinyls, bobbleheads, art prints, pins, a lava lamp, a scaled model of the Brutalist Church which somehow sold out, playing cards, a tree topper, an action figure, a small figurine of Marcel from Marcel the Shell with shoes on, the hand from Talk to Me, a fantasy role-playing game from the Green Knight, the Hereditary Treehouse is a gingerbread house, a grooming set from the Lighthouse, an Everything Everyone Wants Rubik's Cube, Jesus Christ, how many puzzles are they selling, posters, googly eyes, the pet rock from Everything Everyone Wants, coloring sheets, the basketball from Uncut Gems, the gold Furby from Uncut Gems, a diamond grading chart, the sword from the Green Knight, the name patch from Lady Bird, fingerboards, VHS tapes for some of their movies, and the infamous A24 Blu-rays. Films that I collected to support a small company and get some of my favorite films in 4K, despite shoddy packaging that sometimes does not support the discs, which has led to the cheap plastic cases being broken when sent to me, which to be fair, A24 does a great job of replacing A+ customer service. But the Blu-rays have become a focal point of increasing criticism due to their high price, low quality, and the inability to get them from anywhere besides A24. What is frustrating to me is the fact that while A24 saved a few of these films for a limited edition through the company, the majority of their Blu-rays used to be released through a deal with Lionsgate. So whenever you bought Pearl, Past Lives, or Beau is Afraid on Blu-ray, that's why you saw Lionsgate printed on the box. This deal ended at the very end of 2024, and I feel like an idiot for not noticing this before. I typically find myself focusing on these smaller A24 films that never get Blu-rays, like the darkly funny film about grief and loss, All Becoming a Guinea Fowl, and the dreamy coming-of-age film Janet Planet, but every single A24 release from 2025 that's gotten a Blu-ray has gotten a release through the company. What used to be reserved for a select few films and treated like a boutique Blu-ray release, similarly to the way that Criterion or Kino Lorber release a film, albeit of lesser value, now happens with every single one of their Blu-ray releases. My obligation to collect because of my completion OCD got the best of me, and I didn't even notice this. It felt like a unique treat when I got one of these Blu-rays for I Saw the TV Glow or The Zone of Interest or their Stop Making Sense 4K re-release, but I don't want to buy a Blu-ray of The Death of the Unicorn or The Legend of Uchi, and they almost tricked me into buying one. And the same for all of you that feel the need to support this humble, small, quaint, and cute $3.5 billion company. Again, A24 makes good movies, but we need to stop thinking about them as the little guy. For me, there has to be a middle ground between blindly hating and flooding any of these companies with overwhelming praise, and there's nothing wrong with owning any of their merch or collecting some Blu-rays or wanting to support studios supporting independent filmmakers and auteurs making the films they genuinely want to make, instead of making major studio-driven, intellectually property-based films. It's why some filmmakers like Sofia Coppola or Ari Aster feel so supported by the company that it would be a shock if we saw either of them make a film with another studio. There's a reason that we all got A24 tattoos before they started selling the merch that they did. We recognize the great work that was being done, but like how I mentioned A24 is a $3.5 million company, are you, the film-obsessed viewer, recognizing the big differences between the films that they used to make and the films that they currently make? If we look at A24's bigger films from 2017 to 2019, we see that It Comes at Night cost $5 million, A Ghost Story cost $100,000, Good Time $2 million, The Florida Project $2 million, Lady Bird $10 million, Hereditary $10 million, Climax just under $3 million, Midsommar $9 million, and Uncut Gems was $19 million. Now, let's jump to the last few years. Beau is Afraid cost $35 million, Priscilla cost $20 million, The Iron Claw cost just under $16 million, Civil War was $50 million, Queer somehow cost 48 million euros or $56 million, Materialist cost $20 million, Eddington cost $25 million, The Smashing Machine supposedly $70 million, Marty Supreme about $70 to $90 million, and the crown gem of cost, and while not technically in budget yet because the film hasn't been made, it is believed that A24 is spending anywhere from $100 to $150 million on the Elden Ring film. This growth is wild once you put it in this perspective, and while I have no doubt that the Elden Ring film will be a huge financial hit regardless of its critical reception, it is also going to be a film likely costing more than A24's current highest grossing film worldwide, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I don't think in isolation bigger budgets are awful in film. They allow for directors to explore bigger ideas, and in the case of film production, it also means that there's a better chance for people working on a film to be paid a better wage, although that's not a guarantee for any size production. And those who worked at A24 claimed in the New Yorker article that the loss of a director like Robert Eggers to a studio like Focus Features because of the ability to make Nosferatu with a much bigger budget than A24 would allow, and to this I say, sure, fair. I get it. Being able to provide directors with adequate budgets to explore bigger ideas is ideal, especially if you worked with them before in the past. I am glad that Ari Aster could make Beau is Afraid and Eddington even if you hated those movies. But on the other hand, A24 is clearly creating a valid difference between how their big budget and low budget movies are treated, and we're now seeing a disappearing mid-budget line of movies, which is what made the company in the first place. Looking at that New Yorker article again, a few names and films are mentioned as not having received support from A24 before. It's caused them to go elsewhere or lead to a very backwards way for the films to end up at A24. With the latter, it's been reported that A24 didn't want to fund the cringe comedy Friendship starring Tim Robinson and Paul Rudd because of its cost, but then they saw audiences love it at the Toronto International Film Festival and then confusingly swept it up and bought it anyways. And also in the case of the Palme d'Or winner and Best Picture winner Nora, Sean Baker clearly left A24, a move that I have heard rumored is because of the way that Red Rocket was handled during its release. I'm not sure the truth of that, I'm just saying what I've heard from people. And because of the success of Anora, there's been clear verbal attempts from both parties to make sure that Baker's next film is made at Neon. And while less notable to some, but very important to me because I love her, after Kelly Reichardt made First Cow and showing up at A24, there was less interest in funding her next film, The Mastermind, because of the desired increased budget, and now that film ended up at MUBi. It's important that A24 is still making these artist-driven films, but it seems like a lot of these key films that put A24 on the map aren't just getting made by the company anymore, they're being made by Neon or MUBi. And while what I'm about to say happens at every studio, including Neon and MUBi, it becomes more disheartening that A24's smaller features, Earth Mama, All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, Sorry Baby, On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, Janet Planet, and The Eternal Daughter, films made mostly by female or non-binary filmmakers and largely black filmmakers, are getting buried when there's the profile to better support these films. It's beginning to feel like A24 is turning into one of these larger studios, but with the clear appeal from audience members due to the already existing cult of personality, which is extended to both audience members and filmmakers wanting to see these stories getting made. Very specifically in the New Yorker article, it's mentioned that A24 wants to be the Miramax of the 80s and the 90s, making very small, auteur-driven films. They do not want to be the Miramax of the mid-2000s. Yet, are they approaching that territory? And to be fair, lots of these major studios were making auteur-driven films in the 70s and the 80s. There's lots of films that were made by major studios that would shock people now. But when does A24 become one of those major studios? While some level of critique has always been levied towards A24, and almost for a somewhat fair reason, the reveal of Thrive Capital, an investment firm providing major backing for OpenAI, the company supporting ChatGPT, providing A24 a $3.5 billion valuation and $75 million cash, has been understandably questioned by many in the film community online, especially when we reflect on the discussions on the environmental impact of generative AI, how it plagiarizes from the work of others, and how all things considered, it's anti-art. But were the signs that this was happening were in front of us the whole time, and we all just minimized how severe it really was? Looking back, I believe that there's only two instances where we thought about generative AI being associated with a company, one positive and one negative. Now, the most negative was a series of blunders where generative AI was used to produce several ads for the movie Civil War on Instagram, and then A24 never really addressed it despite all the controversy out there, but then also the critiques seemed to be quickly forgotten, and when the directors of Heretic put a message in their end credits about how there was no use of generative AI in the film, people started to view A24 a lot more positively when it came to the thoughts about generative AI. It was understandable praise, I get it, and personally, I think it's a move that we are a lot more comfortable attributing to a $3.5 million itsy witsy tiny boy rather than Scott Beck and Brian Woods, the directors of Heretic. They took a stronger stand than most were willing to in the industry, and I really appreciate the fact that they did put this disclaimer at the end of the film. And although the conversations are recent about A24's cash infusion from Thrive, it's been there since June 2024. There were some conversations I remember happening at the time where people were starting to question the type of company that A24 would become, and we're starting to see some of this. Since then, and because of the clarification and confirmation that we have from this New Yorker article, we know that A24 executives have been having meetings with directors about using generative AI in their films, leading to a few notable directors speaking out about AI, but not naming that this was likely in reflection of A24-centered meetings. Ari Aster recently said when speaking on his fears of generative AI, which is relevant due to the prominence of an AI data center in Eddington, said, "If you talk to these engineers and the people ushering this AI in, they don't talk about AI as this great new medium, they talk about it as a god." And this fell in line with a recent discussion held by Daniel Kwan, co-director of Everything Everywhere All at Once, where he spoke to other prominent filmmakers in a closed-door meeting and said that generative AI was fundamentally incompatible with our institution. And as I say nearly every single video, multiple things can be true. A24 has done fabulous work for independent film. They are also now a several billion-dollar company no longer making the films that put them on the map. While they funded and promoted the films of many directors I love, we can't lose sight of the people making these films and their artistry being the reason for their greatness. And the presence of AI at A24 is not some new scary trend. Of the members of the Big Five film studios, the only one to really challenge generative AI in the most intense and fantastic way is Universal, who has now put a disclaimer in the credits of their films naming that if any of their properties are used to train a generative AI program, Universal will sue them. At the same time, Disney has joined Universal in a lawsuit against Midjourney, and while having a history of using generative AI and experimenting on it, it is now known that those experiments are viewed as a huge failure internally at Disney. And within days of me recording this script, Warner Brothers has also joined this lawsuit due to Midjourney stealing multiple properties, including Bugs Bunny, Superman, Batman, etc. But we've also seen Warner Brothers use AI in advertising, with many people threatening to boycott Weapons, the new horror epic, due to an ad using generative AI to move a drawing that was in the style of a children's drawing. But thankfully that was just a decision by marketing, and this footage was not present in the film. And then we have Sony and Paramount, the former having a generative AI team and the latter using generative AI all over the place in the curation of children's media on Paramount Plus, the creation of ads, and you can also use generative AI to own plots of lands from your favorite show on Facebook. I'm genuinely a little speechless here. And again, I'm not saying this to excuse A24, but at the same time, none of this is okay. The use of generative AI is destructive to this industry and just proves that A24 is closer in identity to the big five than we give credit. And if there's ever a moment where one of these studios releases a film with generative AI or mandates generative AI, I will boycott them in the studio. Speaking of boycotts, I've once again made people mad online for currently boycotting MUBi because the funds they received from Sequoia Capital was actively profiteering off a genocide. Now, whenever anyone's pushed back against me for this boycott, a few common themes arise. One is this idea of comparison. Why are we boycotting MUBi for this, but also not boycotting A24 for their use of generative AI, or other companies that are also funded by Sequoia? And in the case of A24, like I said, filmmakers themselves are not pushing out generative AI movies despite the insistence of the executives. It is a greater evil that could arise in any of these studios, and in this case the dirty money funding A24, such as that of Zionists who have bankrolled many of the films in the company, is not equal to someone who's actively profiteering off a genocide and contributing to the deaths of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands at this point. And in terms of Sequoia, they have money in Reddit, Nvidia, Apple, YouTube, Google, Instacart, DoorDash, Airbnb, PayPal, Block, who owns Square, Cash App, Tidal, and other companies, WhatsApp, and Instagram. It is hard to live in a world without engaging in a product or a company that they've touched, but in those cases like Google, it's much harder for someone to stop using their Gmail account, or to stop using YouTube, or to stop using their Google phone, or to stop using Gotcha for web verification because Google owns that, compared to not watching any films from MUBi as a platform. The feasibility is beyond different, and there is a reason that many have called on this boycott. The money from Sequoia is new and feels antithetical to MUBi's mission, the Palestinian films that they've hosted, and there's a reason why directors currently working with the company have signed letters expressing their dissatisfaction with the company as a whole. And whenever I mention a boycott of an independent film or independent studio, people often say, James, well, you're hurting independent film. And to that I say, there are other movies, there are other studios. Things will be okay without MUBi. And now we have by far our most innocent culprit, Neon, a studio that the level of criticism that I'm about to levy is not nearly the same as A24 or MUBi. It's not even the same ballpark at all. It's just something that I'm keeping my eye on just because I'm a bit of a pessimist. It doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen at all. Great studio, great films. Just don't screw up your distribution. And the reason I'm talking about this, of course, is the fact that Neon's pursuits to get the Palme are starting to concern me. Because while it was cute for the first 5 years or so, there was a lot less certainty going into the 2025 Cannes Film Festival, and some of the acquisitions made by Neon, while not bad, definitely concerned me in terms of how comical it was getting at a point. Going to Cannes, Neon had 2 films up for competition for the Palme d'Or: Alpha, the newest film from Titan director Julia Ducournau, and Joachim Trier's Sentimental Value, as well as having the Dakota Johnson comedy Splitsville play out a competition alongside Orwell, a documentary about George Orwell. And then as the Cannes Film Festival shifted and titles got more buzz with less certainty about their win, along with Neon just shopping for films anyways to release because that happens, they picked up a lot of movies. They got distribution for It Was Just an Accident, the future Palme d'Or winner, Arco, an animated children's science fiction film, Exit 8, a film adaptation for a recent horror video game, Surat, the jury prize winner of Cannes, and the well-received The Secret Agent. Now, not every single one of these movies was up for competition, but I do have to name this. Neon had rights to 5 of the 22 films nominated for the Palme, which, to point out, A24 had 1 in Eddington and MUBi had 3 films. This genuinely comes across to me like a greed that that makes me just wonder how exactly these films are going to be released. Because in the United States, It Was Just an Accident is getting released October 15th, Sentimental Value is releasing November 7th, and then somehow Keeper, Oz Perkins' newest film, Arco, and Seurat are all releasing November 14th, and The Secret Agent is coming out November 26th, while Exit 8 is getting a 2026 release after playing at a few more festivals, and Alpha has been pulled off of Neon's release schedule after an originally planned October 2025 release. Technically, there's a chance that not all these films will release the same day, not all these same films have the same quote-unquote market viability, some will make more money than others just naturally because of what they are. But my god, releasing this many films on top of each other, whether it's limited or wide releases, is wild. You're competing with yourself here. When we look at all these releases, I genuinely wonder if they're all going to be getting the care that they deserve, and if Neon's crowded fall slate is to see what sticks at the box office, or for award season, it could be for either. I'm afraid if this is just going to be the norm. And not to belittle the importance of distribution over production, but again, thinking about this video being about challenging brand, Neon is not making these movies. For the most part, they are not involved in the creation of these films, and sometimes it feels like they're trying to overshadow the filmmakers involved. What makes me more concerned about this is a trend and comparison made by Neon's CEO several months ago, where he didn't view A24 as their biggest competition. He said it was Netflix, which is true in the context of Neon losing the rights to a couple of films to Netflix, including Richard Linklater's Hitman, but also makes me think about how many films get buried in Netflix's algorithm. And when looking at this release slate again, can Neon make sure that all these wonderful films get the attention they deserve? And when it comes to the Palme, are they highlighting the directors enough, or is this becoming more about the brand and the company? I really want to sit in this extended criticism because I think it's important that we actually talk about who these companies are. While I have appreciated the work that they've done in the past, whether distribution or production, these films have really changed my life, right? I think we need to start talking about the ways that harmful practice is creeping into independent film, and is this all really independent film still? While I'm glad that these companies are able to thrive and succeed, I'm also feeling like they're getting so large that it's hard for me to recognize them in any way, shape, or form. And due to this capitalistic need to grow and grow and grow, they're just becoming one of the big guys now. I don't think these companies are entirely antithetical to what they stood for. I don't think there's an issue with buying an A24 hat or a Neon shirt or whatever, but we need to start being a lot more critical, and we need to pop the bubble of deification that we have towards any of them. And when I see these companies grow and I see the way that these trends are going, I think it makes it more important now than ever to actually really highlight, hey, who are the people making these films? Who are the directors? Who are the writers? Who are the actors? Who are the cinematographers? Who is everyone involved? And making sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that, hey, they made the magic happen, not necessarily the people at these companies. I hope this at least starts a conversation where we can have at least some basic critique for billion-dollar companies. This is James signing off. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, check out my other videos, and hope you all have a good one.